What brought me to looking into my past lives was an interaction with a 3-year-old girl. I was really into those Ask Reddit threads where somebody would post a question like, what's the creepiest thing your child has ever said? Inevitably, they'll turn into a bunch of responses from people with 3-year-olds, and the 3-year-olds are recounting memories from past lives. So it made me reason that 3-year-olds were verbal enough to communicate what they remembered with adults, but also close enough to the other side that they still could recall things that adults mostly couldn't. But I'm never around 3-year-olds. Then one time in the summer of 2017, I went to see a friend that I'd gone to high school with. She was watching her niece who had just celebrated her 3rd birthday. And we're sitting there at like the kitchen table, and her niece started pointing at my stomach, like my lower left abdomen specifically. And she kept saying, why does she have a hole in her stomach? Why does she have a hole in her stomach? My torso was completely covered. I was wearing like a red shirt and like a cardigan, but the little girl kept pointing and saying, why does she have a hole in her stomach? So I asked her to describe it, and she said it was black. It was just interesting because I've had a lot of trouble with that part of my body. I'm holding stuff in that part of my body. So I went home and I Googled like 3-year-old says you have a hole in your stomach. Like, what do you Google to find something relating to this? But it turned up a result, a recounting of a past life regression that the Scottish person had done with a 3-year-old child. I booked a session with him even though he was insanely overpriced, and I didn't have a lot of money then either. He did confirm another past life that I had seen myself. I'd seen what looked like a young woman, a young Polish Jewish woman living in Nazi-occupied Poland. Without my saying anything, this Scottish person saw that life as well and filled in additional details. Many past lives came up, at least 36, I want to say, including one that spoke directly to why I have this hole in my lower abdomen. It's from a native life where like a colonizer stabbed me with a bayonet, and it seemed to be about taking in the energy of patriarchy more directly to my energetic body so that I would have to transmute that energy much more experientially, which I think helped me drop into the experience of being a human on Earth much more viscerally. I still feel it now. I have lower back problems on my left lower back that I've been dealing with for years, and I'm wondering if it's just trying to make me pay even more attention to it to make sure I'm healing it and releasing it like at this time. It wasn't too long before this memory came up, and I didn't understand it at first at all. I just had this sense of like being in this beautiful city that was sort of in the water, built in and around the water. There was sort of a circular structure. It was so, like, the reason it's hard to make this video, and I forgot how difficult it is still to talk about this, is that I'm so sad. I feel a deep grief about the loss of what I feel so strongly that we had there. My biggest challenge is a strong resistance to the way Earth is today and the energies here and how terrible they are for everybody, how much they overvalue toxic masculine energies in people of all genders and denigrate feminine energies in people of all genders, and it makes me want to leave Earth. Like, I just want to get on a spaceship. The energy was beautiful. It was so harmonious. We didn't have masculine and feminine energies in the way that they're understood today, even in their healthy forms. It was something higher than that. The feminine wasn't continually abused and treated horribly like the way it's been since. And we could communicate telepathically. I was some sort of priestess or something. I had a lot of abilities. I had like a masculine counterpart who was like my love, my partner, even though again, like feminine and masculine didn't exist there in the same way that they do now. This being who was my masculine counterpart in that life has shown up in a bunch of other past lives. He was the father who was killed by Nazis, and I loved him very much. He showed up in another life where I was like a male painter. We had a homosexual relationship that was predating the word like homosexual even existing. So I just feel this longing for this particular being, and I haven't met them in this lifetime. This is so embarrassing to say, but I think I know who that person is. I saw this film made by this first-time filmmaker. The film was about a young Polish girl who becomes a singer, and this person who's like her father figure who has lost his daughter comes in to help her become this successful singer. I was watching this interview that he gave. The interviewer was like, why did you want to make a story? Like, why was your first film about a teenage Polish girl? As soon as the interviewer said that, I started crying. I understood that he remembered that story too. It was about him trying to recreate a situation where a father figure could come in and help that singer realize her destiny, her dreams. Because in the past life, now I feel embarrassed again talking about this, because in the past life where he died, I couldn't do it. I was so sad after he died, and I mean, we were under Nazi occupation. There just weren't options. I also feel like I didn't fulfill the highest potential, certainly in that life, because this is what's going to sound the craziest. My sense is that the highest path in that life was about me becoming an internationally known singer, because then I could have made people more aware of what was going on with the Nazis more quickly, and I would have been listened to. There was this potentiality that it could have saved lives. I just couldn't do it because I was so debilitated by grief after the father figure died in that life. So in this life, I'm convinced that he is this young filmmaker / actor, this semi-famous person. And I think this being was with me in Atlantis. It was so beautiful, it was so harmonious, it was so green and lush, and there was water everywhere. We were so happy, and the technology that was available to us was so beyond what we can even imagine today. And crystals were a big part of it. Copper, I think, was significant as well. It was foundationally designed in very different ways. I think the tech today is designed in a way that skews toward masculine energies. Reading the I Ching gave Leibniz the idea to communicate written logic problems numerically using ones and zeros. One was the yang equivalent, the masculine equivalent, and zero became the yin equivalent, the feminine equivalent. And I think that was a mistake in translating the feminine to nothing. Technology in Atlantis wasn't like that. It had a feminine foundation. This is gonna sound trippy too, but I had this other idea come into me once when I was meditating, doing Vipassana meditation, that instead of concrete ones and zeros from the outset, the foundation of the computing systems of the future is gonna have to behave a lot more like matter, able to be a particle and a wave simultaneously, shifted by the observer and so forth. And I don't know how that's gonna look, but I have this sense, this is embarrassing to say too, it came in my mind while I was meditating that that's going to be something that I'll work on in the later stages of my life. A group of people came to us and they looked a lot like us, but they were different from us. They weren't able to plug into our telepathic connection. They wanted our help because they wanted to learn more about our technology and our energy and so forth. And it was in our nature to help anytime it was needed, so we were happy to help this group. Because they couldn't plug in telepathically in the way that we did when we communicated, I was appointed as sort of spokesperson for my people to sort of teach them using something like language, kind of like the way we approach education today, where there's a teacher speaking to a bunch of people. This was a mistake for multiple reasons. One piece of it is that it introduced this sort of proto-hierarchy, in that I had knowledge then that the rest of my people didn't have access to. There wouldn't have been another way that we could see to help these people, so it was a mistake that was made with good intentions. But in introducing this proto-hierarchy, which then became patriarchy down the line, made things hard for humans for many thousands of years. This was the very beginning of it, the seed. It also introduced this separateness, these ideas of ego that keep us separate today, that cause a lot of suffering for people because of, this illusion that we're alone and that we're not supported, when actually energies are always there to support us if we're able to tap into them. So because I was the spokesperson for my people, I was communicating with what I'm going to start calling the attackers. And I knew things about what the attackers were thinking and were doing and were saying that the rest of my people obviously didn't know. And they wanted to take our energy and siphon it off into another dimension and take our technology. And in doing that, it would destroy our civilization. And they understood that. That was their intention all along. I realized this. And again, because I had this sort of weird special position. I understood this before any of the rest of my people became aware of it. Because I was aware of it and I understood that there was a limited amount of time, I made this decision to, this is gonna sound crazy, to dissolve myself, to put my energy into them, to try and shift them enough so that it wouldn't decide to kill us all. So I did that and it didn't work, and they destroyed our civilization. The mistake was that I should have involved my people. I shouldn't have been isolating myself in any way. Of course, it's all perfect. This is all part of a longer trajectory that we needed to go through to learn a greater lesson. And I understand that intellectually, even though emotionally I still feel a huge amount of resistance to the memory of this happening, to the idea that this happened. When I chose to dissolve myself, I knew that it meant sacrificing myself. The idea of self wasn't present in that way. It didn't even occur to me to hesitate in that regard. And I have this memory of like going up in the air, like I was able to propel myself up in the air, like a ways up, many feet, 10, 15 feet up in the air. I was looking down at like my lover, my masculine counterpart in that life, and I can see his face. And he understood that I was choosing to make the sacrifice. And he was really, really sad about that. And he died not too long after during that attack. Fast forward to New Year's 2019. I decided to go to a Vipassana meditation course in Northern California. And I was living in South Pasadena at the time, so like LA area. It was a Goenka course, so they have a rideshare board. I was able to get a ride with this Israeli guy who lived in LA. And we had this email exchange in advance, and he was so warm and friendly and nice, and I really appreciated, like his generosity. And then when I went to meet him that day, I think I took like an Uber over to meet him at his car. We hugged each other as soon as we saw each other. And then there was this immediate, inexplicable sense of mutual dislike for like no apparent reason. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, like how are we gonna be in a car together for 5+ hours when we have this feeling? And I was certain that he felt it too. But we went and picked up a third passenger, this Hungarian woman who was the same age as me, who had moved to LA like recently. She was like a big TV star in Hungary. That dissipated the tension, so it was fine. For some reason, during this car ride, I felt compelled to tell them about my recent past life regression. And the girl, Julia, said that she thought she had had a past life in Atlantis as well. She said she felt like she hadn't been on Earth much, like she had maybe one other past life on Earth where she was native. She said she remembered her mother sacrificing herself to try and save people. She remembered her grandparents. She remembered their names even. Remember, she said that the grandfather's name was Lucian. And she had a memory of like waking up on a table or something when like somebody removed like a crystal anklet. When she woke up, she realized that experiments were being performed on her. So that sounded like it was after the attackers had won. So she shared this memory. And when I was sharing my memory and getting embarrassed about the part where, I said that I dissolved myself because I totally didn't understand what that even meant, Julia was like, well, in Atlantis, they had this technology, this thing called a Merkaba, and they used it to dissolve themselves. And then Daniel takes this necklace. He's wearing this necklace the whole time. He holds it up and he has a Merkaba on this chain around his neck, y'all. Julia later independently told me that she thought that Daniel was on the attacker's side, and that completely explained this mutual sense of dislike, lasting whatever millennia later. We went to this Vipassana course, we're at this center. I talked to Julia again afterward, and she says that at one point she saw me walking in like this forest area across the way, and she had the thought that I needed to forgive myself. And at that time, it was so real that I felt super guilty all the time. I felt like I needed to take on this burden for a lot of people to save people, and that I needed to carry it by myself. Now I really understand that was the mistake that I made back then. I shouldn't have tried to do so much on my own, and I certainly shouldn't try to do that in this life either. We have to come together in this life and collaborate and uplift that energy together this time around so that we can start to heal and integrate what happened at that time. And Julia told me at other times, I was sitting in the first row at this course and she was in the second row. She told me that sometimes during the course she would look up and see me and think like she's right there. The implication was that I was the mother that she had lost in that Atlantis life. Later on, I met up with Julia in LA to get like coffee or tea or something, and she mentioned this movie from 2001. It's about Atlantis. It's a cartoon, like a Disney film. It was weird that I had never heard of it before then because I grew up in a household that had like seemingly every Disney film. Julia told me that when she watched the beginning of the film, the mother sacrifices herself and the child is there, and it just made her cry. Y'all, when I saw that, I just started to sob. Like, it was such a deep, visceral thing too, like a deep grief. So let me bring this into the present day. I've become convinced that late stage capitalism and its zero-sum extractive design and the way it isolates us in many ways, it's a mistake. It's not of the future. Bit by bit over time, I realized what the ecosystem for seeds should be. When you help someone in need through seeds, you get seeds cryptocurrency and thanks. So that way, like if and when the crypto markets go up, it's the generous people who are building wealth because they were kind, because they gave. So it transcends this, zero-sum extractive design baked into late-stage capitalism. It also transcends this dumb nonprofit for-profit binary we've had to deal with because the old system centers self-interest. Most humans aren't behaving in a self-interested way all the time, especially those that have a lot of healthy feminine energy. So we need a system that supports that. So Seeds is about helping us get out of this old extractive system because I think escaping the old money system is perhaps the biggest way to unlock greater human potential. You can redeem a seed to ask for help, to start an art project, to just support your basic expenses if you need to do that. It's there to support us through this transition from the old era into, like ascension to 5D. And I think, getting us out of late stage capitalism into something that's of a higher order is a huge deal if it can be done at scale, and Seeds has already helped people in need in 29 countries and counting. I'm struggling through making this video to try and share this for those with whom it may resonate. If it does resonate, consider helping someone in need through Seeds and you'll get Seeds cryptocurrency and thanks. The more of us that do this, I think especially the more of us that are like spiritually conscious and more aware of this transition that humanity is going through at this point in time in history, the more it can uplift people at scale. I need help. I need to ask for help this time. There isn't much on YouTube about past lives in Atlantis, and there isn't much on Reddit either. I was trying to start something on TikTok like Atlantis Talk, and there just really isn't a ton of stuff that I've been able to find. So I'm hoping that we can start more of these discussions to find more people who do feel like they remember being there at that time, because we all incarnated again together now for a reason. All right, if you got here this far, thank you so much for listening. Whew, I appreciate you. I'll catch you later. Bye. Oh, this is so hard to talk about.